The elves refer to mental illnesses as curses. You have been brought in to cure the elven princess of her curse. From user Encore 41. I was sitting in an elvish bedchamber, with easily the most beautiful woman I had seen in my life across from me, telling me about this curse she is afflicted with. It didn't help that armed sentries stood at the entryway, less than thrilled with my audience. I woke up from what felt like a lifetime of sleep to this fantastical realm, being told I needed to use my reputable powers of healing to lift the curse from this guy's daughter. Along with the culture shock and lack of choice in the matter, I accepted. For as much I wished to figure out my own problems at this time, it was clear that would have to wait. That's rough, I said, scrambling for the right words. A lack of sleep would leave anyone in disarray. But these voices, these things. They feel like they're there. She nodded. Her eyes were puffy and red, with darkened circles underneath. She wasn't lying about not sleeping. Also, I want to personally thank you, she said. My father has yet to find anyone that matches your broad talents of remedy. It's okay, I'm just happy to help, princess. It wasn't true. Can I ask you something? The princess said. Sure. How do you do it? Do what? Remove curses. You're an expert, aren't you? Well, that's what your father said, right? The princess sighed. He says a lot of things. I've learned to tune out most of it over the last couple 100 years, but at least he means well. Not everyone is so lucky to have a dad who cares about their daughter. Why is that? The princess asked, with legitimate wonder. I was shocked at someone asking such a thing. However, looking around the densely ornate room decked with white and gold architecture, it wasn't a stretch to assume this was someone who had their feet nowhere near the ground of reality. Well, how can I put this? I said, thinking. Not everyone who has children do so for the same reason. I like to think most people want children to raise them higher than the parents could ever reach. Unfortunately, the fact is there are lots of selfish people in the world, people who expect their kids to help them unconditionally. Hearing that come out my mouth was a surprise. She looked at me with focus. Her eyes like dense sapphires socketed deep within her face. I could tell that she was counting on me to fix her problems, that she had little elsewhere to turn. How strange, the princess said. My father would never expect me to handle his problems. As a matter of fact, he insists that he can handle many of the kingdom's problems on his own. We've seen the toll it takes on him, but no one would dare imply he needed help. There was silence. The gentle breeze whisked through a nearby elm, with branches no more than a foot outside her window. Now I have a question for you, princess. She was taken aback. Few have ever addressed her so casually. However, she was intrigued by the interloper, if anything. Do you think people always need help to solve their problems, or that they need to figure things out for themselves? How do you mean? I leaned back in my chair. It was cushiony, but the backrest was not ergonomically made for a human. A tenseness squeezed throughout my back as I compiled my thoughts together. Well, let's use your father as an example. Running a kingdom is difficult for anyone. And while he may be king, he can't be expected to do everything by himself. Suddenly, the armed guards at the door behind me stepped forward, their metal armor clanking to break the serene atmosphere. It seems they didn't appreciate my fumbled attempt of framing an example. But, the princess held up her hand without a moment's hesitation, signaling them to halt. Turning around in my seat, the guards froze, then returned to their position. Excuse them, the princess said. Continue. Impressed by the display of authority, I gathered my thoughts once more. Right. So, running a kingdom is difficult. It takes a whole team of qualified people to manage and keep everything in working order. If one person were to do such task, they would collapse under the weight of it all. The princess thought for a moment, looking off to her tree outside. Through the golden sun rays filling the room, she appeared as a masterpiece of art. I still couldn't get over how beautiful everyone in this kingdom was. It makes sense, she said. Now, I said. On the other hand, there are times you have to be able to meet the challenge head-on and handle difficult situations when they arise. It's not knowing when those times come, but rather, knowing you're strong enough to handle them when they do. That's what makes your father the king. She smiled. It was clear she was proud of her dad. You're very kind, she said with sincerity. I scrapped the back of my mind for something to tie this whole bundle of ideas together. After hours of tears and complaining, we were finally making headway. As for you, I said. You have already done the hard part. You've recognized that there is, in fact, a problem. You've asked for my help, and I am here to do just that. But like your father, you must learn that you have to rise to meet the challenge if you're going to conquer it for good. Can you do that? Silence once more. She was thinking deeply. It was the calmest she had been this whole session. The princess spoke up, if I say yes, will you see to it we make it there together? There was absolutely no part of me that thought I could solve her problem. I had never lifted a curse, nor come across one. Yet, there was a growing fire within my spirit, a passion that couldn't answer any other way. I will. From user Deepstia. Shrinking of the Elven Princess. I poured myself a cup of tea after my client left. As I sat down to review my notes, I heard a sudden whoosh, and the whole world spun around me as I fell through a portal. Colors around me shone, and my body stretched, all of it just lasting a split second. I found myself sitting on a wide, round platform made of marble. I looked around, disoriented. There were people in fancy robes standing in a wide circle around me, some whispering among themselves, some staring at me. I suddenly realized their pointed ears. Elves? Was I teleported to a Comic-Con? But it all felt too authentic. Suddenly, my confusion was interrupted by a stern voice. Silence in the small council, please. It was a woman speaking, sitting in a chair higher than the rest. Her robes were white and gold, with intricate details of flowers that matched her golden crown. I figured she must be the queen or some kind of royalty. My instincts told me she was in charge of the council. I tried to get a word out, to ask about where I was, and who they were, but the attempt only made me dizzier. I threw up on the marble floor, while the council members gasped and whispered among themselves again. Though incoherent to my ears, it somehow sounded more judgmental. Another person spoke up. It is normal to feel your insides challenged after a mortal's first few portal travels, friends. No need to think ill of the cursebreaker. I wiped my mouth with my sleeve and looked up. This time the speaker was an older male sitting next to the Elven Queen, dressed in blue and silver robes. His comment didn't bring down the tension in the room, as people continued to whisper among themselves. Now even the Queen and the blue-robed elf were talking about something quietly. The only person who seemed to be disinterested in gossiping about me was the person sitting on the other side of the Queen. While most elves looked practically ageless, I noticed she must have been younger than the others. More than her face, it was her expressions, nervous and timid, bored in this room, avoiding eye contact with everyone in the room including me. I briefly locked eyes with her but she quickly looked away, and so did I. Finally, I managed to gather myself to speak a word. Hey! Everyone looked at me as if I'd cursed at them. Yet, they seemed to be listening to me, so I continued. Hi, yes. I don't really know what's happening here, so, can someone please tell me what is going on, because I worry I might be going a little crazy right now. 'Cause you see, I was in my office. The Queen lifted her hand, and I shut up. She had an intimidating yet maternal presence. Cursebreaker, we summoned you here to undo the curse that ails the princess. She gestured toward the quiet girl. You see, we summoned many sorcerers here from our realm, yet all failed to find a proper remedy. So we searched the other realms, hoping to find someone who could free my daughter from the shackles of this curse. Finally, my advisor Velithul found you. She gestured at the blue-robed elf. He told us that you've had years of training and knowledge on how to break the curses of the mind. I must have failed to hide my bafflement because the same confusion was mirrored on the queen's face. I quickly gathered myself and replied. I still can't tell if you're serious, your highness. But yes, I do help treat mental illness. Oh, but this is no illness, Cursebreaker, said Velithul. Princess Saldana has a curse placed on her mind. He looked toward the quiet girl with pity. She has lost her appetite, peaceful slumber has long evaded her. She no longer takes joy in playing the lute, watching the plays, or even conversing with her friends. She has. I am right here, Velithul. The princess rose from her seat, and I can speak for myself. Of course, my princess. Velithul bowed and moved back to his seat. Everyone followed him and sat back in their seats except for the queen. The princess stepped towards me. Velithul speaks the truth. I have been long suffering from this curse. Do they speak the truth? Can you truly free me from this curse? She looked at me with desperation. While I've been used to treading carefully with what I say to my clients in moments of distress, I figured this may be a more sensitive situation with otherworldly royalty involved, who also believe depression to be some sort of a curse. I suppose that was one way of putting it, and in some ways, they were not completely wrong. It could certainly feel like one. So for now, I decided to play along. Forgive the misunderstanding, Your Grace. See, I was confused. In my realm, this curse is called an illness too, since it makes people feel sick in their minds and souls. But yes, I've been a psychologist for 12 years now. Everyone looked at me with confusion. I mean, Cursebreaker. We call Cursebreakers psychologists in our realm once they finish their training. Most of the elves nodded in agreement, but not the queen or the princess. We haven't summoned you here to learn about your culture, Cursebreaker. We summoned you to perform your ritual, said the queen sternly. What, do you mean like now? Here? Is there something wrong with that? Well, I just thought after his research, Velithul would have informed me more about my process. The queen's piercing gaze moved from me to the anxious advisor. My queen, we just looked at the comments on their page upon the internet realm. Upon that comment, the queen just looked more confused and angry. I figured I would help out Velithul, hoping to use their ignorance to my advantage. If I may, Your Highness. The process of curse breaking, and oh, yes, I call it a process for it is long and effortful. And no, it can't be done publicly in a place like this. The cursed and the curse breaker need to meet alone, at the same hour every week, for about an hour. So it is the witching hour when you need to perform this disenchantment then. Not, necessarily. But if you prefer that, I think can work that into my schedule. The queen's suspicion hadn't worn off. Princess Saldana sighed, moving the queen's gaze from me onto herself. You said it takes long to take the curse. How long? She asked with despair in her voice. It can be months or years. Each curse is unique. The princess solemnly gazed on the marble floor. The queen reached over to her and held her hand. A few years isn't long for as it is for humans, dear. You'll be back to your old self before you know it. If it were another client's mother, would correct her, and manage the expectations. But it being an elven queen, and her having a point about timescales, I figured I'd keep my mouth shut. As if she had read my thoughts, the queen turned to me. Do you require any ingredients for your disenchantment ritual, magical or non-magical? Ritual, let's at least call it a séance if it suits your highness. The queen nodded in all her seriousness and I continued. We will require 2 comfortable chairs, and a box of tissues perhaps. Or whatever equivalent is there. The queen looked at Velithul. He nodded anxiously, yes, Your Grace. I will find and provide the item. Good, said the queen, sounding pleased for the first time since my arrival. Can you start tonight at the witching hour then, Cursebreaker? It actually doesn't have to be in the middle of the night. Any time the princess prefers is ideal except for Thursday evenings. I have yoga class, an earthly ritual to restore mana. Good for you, responded the queen. Saldana, dear, do you have any preference? How about this afternoon? Saldana shrugged, sure, your grace. Whatever you desire. I thought to myself, it's going to be a lot of unpacking of the relationship between them during our seances. After all, there were a few things more tangled or cursed than a stressful mother-daughter relationship.
That's it for today. Hope you enjoyed these insane stories. Hit that like button, and let's keep the fun going by subscribing. Catch you soon. Ooh, ah, ah.